Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the December 4th NEMSIS V3 implementation call. We appreciate you being on the phone this morning. We have had a few additions. We've had 2 additions to the agenda, and we will address those as they come up. We'll go ahead and get started. Laurel's going to start us off this morning with critical patch number 1. And while Laurel is taking the screen, I'll just remind you to use the chat feature if you have any questions, unmute your microphone if you need to ask something, and we're happy to encourage any conversation and questions and concerns. So this should be a participatory call, and we appreciate your participation. All right, Laurel, it is all you.
Okay, thanks, Julianne. Could I actually have you share those 2 pages that I had you bring up just a little bit ago?
Yep, I sure will.
Sorry, I didn't have everything pulled up on my computer.
That's okay. Which one do you want first?
Let's start with the data dictionary. Awesome. Okay, so big announcement. We are finally done with version 3.5.0. If we make any more changes, it's going to be 3.5.1. So we released the critical patch. All the XSD changes were done last week before we all left for the holiday, but it was pushed into the main branch of the repository just yesterday. The data dictionary has been updated, XSDs are updated, schematrons are updated, and all associated resources have been updated for this new critical patch. So this is the version that everyone should be moving forward with, this November 30th version. There were not huge sweeping changes. We made some changes to the custom element IDs and some other items that had a minimum length of 0. They now have a minimum length of 2. So if you were using a single character for a custom element ID in your implementation in 3.4, that would no longer work in 3.5. We cleaned up some places where custom element IDs were not properly implemented on the right elements or groups. And I believe we added a value to ePayment 05 in accordance with this CMS stuff that's been going on. There may be more changes in the future for ET3, etc. But for now, I think the only change was in ePayment 05. So if you want to flip through the dictionary and see what's changed, it's not much, I promise. And all of those changed items were added to the change log for version 3.4 critical patch 2 to 3.5 critical patch 1. If anyone has any questions about the updates in this critical patch, I'm happy to answer them now. If not, I can just move right along to talking about what's going to happen to all of our future requests for changes. So, any questions on this release?
Hey, Laurel, could you show folks where the changelog is?
Yeah, so if you go to the NEMSIS website and you head to technical resources, and under that there's one called data dictionary and XSD. Believe it's linked on this page. Okay, stand by. I don't know.
I think it's actually on the archive page.
So yeah, under technical resources, let's try archive. Just go to the main menu up there, and the archive is on the left side right there. Yeah, there it is. The changelog is on this page. I need to update this page because I haven't added the latest build. If you're a software vendor, I would recommend you hit our Git repository though to find these types of resources. So there's a link on this NEMSIS archive page, kind of at the top, right by the breadcrumbs, that takes you to the Git repository. I believe there is also a link to our Git repository, yeah, in the footer of every page of the website. So in the footer of the website on the left side, you'll see kind of a gray box and a list of links. One of them is the Git repository. So if you're a vendor, I would go to the Git repository. Then you can make sure you're looking at the resources for the exact version and build you want. And it'll be a little easier to find documents, as they're always going to sort of reside in the same folders, no matter which version you're looking for. But yeah, the changelog is here. I'll add another blurb that has the critical patch for NEMSIS 3.5 to this archive page today, so that that's available to you through the website. Any other questions about the release? Okay, if anyone thinks of a question, feel free to put it in the chat, shout it out, email me. If you find a problem in the release, please let me know so that we can add that to our log and get it corrected sooner or later based on how urgent it is. And if you think of any changes, any things you want to see in the next release of NEMSIS, also feel free to let us know about those, so that we can add them to our Git repository. So that sort of brings me to my next topic, which is what are we going to do for changes moving forward? So we're continuing to log changes that we receive, change requests that we receive into that same Git repository that we were using for 3.5. So you can get to it from that 3.5 page on the site that we've showed you several times before. Julian already has it open. It's just that next tab right there. So new changes that have been requested are going to start showing up on this page. There'll be we'll have a new column that shows up here that'll have a backlog of things that have been requested. And as we begin to prepare for the next version of NEMSIS, we'll start going through that backlog of items and the same process we always have, work groups, et cetera, to decide what will and won't be implemented. So if you're looking for what ideas people have come up with or suggested for the next version, this is the page they will exist on. And as always, the closed items from the 3.5 release and resolved items will continue to appear here. So feel free to send in any ideas, suggestions, bugs that you find so that we can get those resolved in our next release. I think that covers everything for the critical patch release. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. If not, I think I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker, which is Josh.
Okay, Juliana, if you could go to the first tab in your browser, the compliance page, we'll start there. So right on the heels of the 3.5.0 critical patch release, we have completed and released the compliance resources for compliance testing. And those have been updated for 3.5.0 on the NEMSIS 3 compliance page, which is accessible through the technical resources menu. We are also preparing updates to the compliance resources for 3.4, and those you'll probably see those come out in the next day or so, so that we will use the same process, sequence, flow of testing for 3.4 and for 3.5. There are some things that are tested in 3.5 that are not tested in 3.4, new requirements, but we'll use the same overall process and steps for the testing in both versions. There have been some changes to the process, and so we're going to want to walk through those a little bit with you today. I think they've all been discussed in advance, but we want to show you how they kind of came out in the final documentation. So Julianne, if you could scroll just a little bit, we'll see a list of compliance resources for 3.5.0. The first change was that the compliance testing process document was split into two documents, one for collect data systems and one for receive and process systems. So whatever type of testing that you're going to undergo as a vendor, you can pick that process document and it'll have just the steps and resources that apply to your particular type of system and the process that you'll go through. So hopefully a little less confusion there, as you don't have to look at steps and requirements that are for other types of systems than the one that you're testing. And there's the pre-testing package, a zip download, or if you clone the Git repository, you'll see all those pre-testing package files available in the repository as well. So that includes HTML documents that give you information about the calls to enter into your software or the records to enter in. And it also gives you the expected XML output from your software. So you can enter the test cases in, you can then export them from your software and check your export to see if it matches the expected export. There's also a couple of schematron schemas in there for testing your ability to deploy those. And there's a state data set file for setting up the system. For local systems, you use that to enter your test cases, then check your output. For receive and process or state level systems, you would take the XML files in that package, you would submit them to your own system, and then you would have your system export those records and make sure that your export matches what was imported. So that's the pre-testing package, and looks very similar to how it looked in 3.4. Okay, I want to look at a couple significant process changes in the testing process. And let's start with the testing guide for collect data systems. If you could open up that one, Julianne. Thanks. Let's scroll down a little bit. So let's go back up. One change that you're going to see, and we'll show you this in a few minutes, is the way that your testing status is tracked and publicly displayed on the NEMSIS website. The 3 steps that will now be shown on the NEMSIS website will be the date on which you submitted your application to the NEMSIS TAC for testing, the date on which you successfully completed all of the test cases in the active testing phase, and the date on which you successfully completed a web conference with Laurel for demonstrating some of your product functionality. And so once all 3 have been completed, then you are listed as a compliant vendor on the NEMSIS website. All right, let's continue to scroll down some. For collect data systems, we did add something at the top of the overview of requirements, which is that your software is able to use information from a state data set for configuration. The mechanism by which you use that information is not prescribed in the compliance testing process. So some of you may employ some automated processing of state data set XML files, which is wonderful and desired. Others, you may use that state data set file as a reference and do some sort of manual processing within your company or whatever to get things set up. But there is a mechanism in the testing process to ensure that you actually did utilize what was in the state data set, and that data is coming back out of your software in demographic and EMS records that match up with what was in the state data set that was provided. The big change in the testing process has to do with the sequence that you'll go through for testing. In the prior process, you would submit your application and then you would begin pre-testing, and then you would move on to active testing and a web conference. The process has been changed so that the pre-testing phase is now an on-your-own step of the process, which means that you can do all of the pre-testing work before you submit your application to the NEMSIS TAC for compliance testing. The pre-testing is not optional. You do need to do it, but you can do it before you've submitted your application for compliance testing. So with the pre-testing self-service, you go grab the pre-testing package and you work your way through these steps, setting up your software, entering the test cases, checking the exports, etc. Go ahead and move down through that process. Once you've completed pre-testing, and that's an on-your-own thing, you say, yep, we've tested, we're now getting output that's consistent with what's expected. Then you submit your application to the NEMSIS TAC. There's a link for doing that. And the NEMSIS TAC will then send you the active testing package with further instructions. So the active testing package, of course, is not available publicly. It's sent to you once you've applied. The active testing package looks like the pre-testing package, but with different test cases, different scenarios, but testing the same features. And then you'll work through the active testing process as well. This looks very similar to how it looked in the past. So go ahead and scroll through those steps. So that involves entering those test cases, checking the output, etc. And then during the active testing process, you'll also have a testing web conference with Laurel. And this web conference can actually happen before you've completely finished the active testing process. You do need to have at least entered the test cases into your software, because Laurel asks you to display those test cases in the data entry screens of your software. But once you've entered the test cases, even if you haven't exported them out to the compliance testing service yet, you can set up that webinar and you'll work through these requirements to demonstrate them through a live webinar. Go ahead and scroll through those ones. Once you've completed the webinar and completed the active testing process, then your certification will be issued. Finally, there is a new requirement for maintaining compliance, and this applies both to local level and state level systems. You will be required to retest within 2 years of your last testing. So your compliance certification essentially is good for 2 years, and then it expires. When you come back within that 2-year period to retest, you will be given a new set of test cases to enter into your software that are current for that year. And you'll use those new cases, enter them in, and go through the process. Additionally, there is a new participation requirement for vendors. And that requirement is that you participate in the NEMSIS v3 implementation calls, the call that we're on right now, throughout the year, and send at least one representative to the annual NEMSIS v3 implementation meeting, the one that's been typically held in Park City, Utah every summer or fall. That participation will be noted and logged on the NEMSIS website on the compliance status page, and that logging will begin in 2020. Okay, I want to look at the receive and process software process, and then I want to open it up for some questions. In receive and process systems, same general process changes, but I want to note a few things that are specific to these state level products. Yeah, that's all the same. Let's go through to the general requirements here. The big additions to the requirements for receive and process systems are their ability to provide a user interface that collects and generates the information that is required to build a state data set for a state, and to also be able to validate that state data set and send it to the national EMS database. Those are the big changes there. As with the collect data products, you will begin pre-testing on your own. You'll just grab the pre-testing package from the Git repository or NEMSIS website, work your way through these steps for pre-testing. You'll see there's a new step there related to setting up state data set. Once you're done with pre-testing, you'll submit your application and begin the active testing process. That similar as well, running through setting up a new state with the active testing resources, testing your imports, testing your exports, custom elements, schematron, etc. Okay, once you've completed your steps of the active testing process, then the NEMSIS TAC, Laurel will run through several steps to test your web service. So she'll be sending data to your web service. And that's similar to the process that's been used in the past. Go ahead and scroll on further. So this works through the things that she'll do to test your web service. Okay, a new piece of testing for receive and process systems is a testing web conference. So in the past, the web conference was only held for collect data products. It'll now be held for receive and process products as well. And the purpose of that web conference is to demonstrate your user interface and functionality for building the information required for a state data set. And that web conference can be held at any time during the active testing process after you have gone ahead and entered your state data set test case so that you can demonstrate that data in your interface. So you don't need to wait till the end of active testing to have the web conference. Once you've completed all those steps, then certification will be granted and you'll have the same requirements that I just described for maintaining certification every 2 years and for maintaining active participation in the webinar and annual meeting. Okay, so I ran through a lot of stuff there. Before we go on to the status page, I want to just pause for questions. So it looks like everything in the chat was related to previous topics. Any questions on this changes to this process? Okay, with no questions, then let's go to the testing status page. I think it's the next tab there in your browser. So the testing status page has been updated in a couple ways. One is that it allows someone right at the top of the page to filter by NEMSIS version. So right now we're filtered to 3.4.0. Of course, for 3.5.0, no one is on the list yet. Let's scroll down and see how things have changed. So here's all your current products that have been certified compliant, the familiar information. And some columns have been added to these tables. One is the date of latest recertification, so that we can demonstrate that you've been recertified within the past 2 years. And then these will be checkboxes or percentage indicators for V3 call participation throughout the year 2020, and then the 2020 annual meeting participation, whether your company sent a representative to that meeting. That's the same thing for the EMS agency software. And then let's scroll down to the very bottom. For the company seeking compliance, undergoing testing right now, this is how this table has changed. So we have the date on which the application was received, the date on which test cases were completed, and the date that the web conference was completed. And once all 3 of those have been completed, then you bump up onto the list of compliant products. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to update the process for 3.4.0 so that it follows the same process as 3.5, but of course, it will not include certain requirements that are new to 3.5. So you'll see those updated resources for 3.4 just in the next few days. All right, any questions at all on the compliance testing process and requirements? Okay, it sounds like we don't have any questions. So Julianne, back to you.
All right, thank you, Josh. Next on our list, Clay, did you want to add anything to Josh's explanation of the maintaining software compliance, or go straight into the e-payment 05 topic?
Yeah, sure, I'll be brief, just adding a couple comments regarding maintaining software compliance. And I apologize ahead of time, and at a conference, so I'll try to be brief because there may be background noise. The opportunity for us to add an attendance requirement to compliance, this was a request that was made by the Data Managers Council and the NEMSIS. So we're trying to follow through on the conversations that happened in Salt Lake City in the spring related to just ensuring the software is kind of up to date with the latest decisions that are made regarding the NEMSIS standard, particularly with new projects such as ET3 going on. There are changes that happen not so much to the standard, but in delivery of the standard often. So this will be a way for us to ensure that products are kind of up to date on what's going on in regards to the NEMSIS standard. Because of this, it'll be important that when you're on the call beginning in 2020 that you identify who you are and the company that you represent. Even today, I see on the bottom of the list of about 40 participants, there are some folks that just have their initials or their phone number listed. So that'll be important. We'll begin in that column on the compliance page with your participation on the first call in 2020. And then we'll just indicate 100%, and we will just try to track that as time goes on. If we somehow miss identify a name to a company, then please just let us know, and we'll try to refine that process as we move forward. So again, any questions relating to the attendance requirement associated with software compliance? Okay, great. I'll move into the next item, the CMS 2020 announcement that there are 3 additional types of healthcare providers that can provide a certification signature on an EPCR. We had a discussion on the call 2 weeks ago about whether to add those 3 new healthcare professional classifications as a custom element, the e-payment 05, or to actually make a critical release to 3.4. We've had several conversations about this. We've contacted several billers and talked about this, and we're landing on the idea of just building a custom element, a standard set of custom elements that would support the addition of these 3 healthcare providers on e-payment 05. We don't have as close relationships with billers as we do with you. Just wanted to once again check and see if there was anyone on the call, any of the vendors or other folks that work with the billers who think that it may be a problem for us to introduce these additional values as a custom element to e-payment 05. Okay, a quiet group today, not hearing any comments, then we'll go ahead with the development of a custom element for e-payment 05. We're building a location on the website that the custom element library now supports the ability to look at custom elements that are built by individual states. We really haven't had a need to have a national custom element area. This will certainly provide an opportunity for us to do that. And then, of course, there are changes to several elements associated with those areas of the country that will be participating in the ET3 project. There'll be changes to e-disposition 21 and probably to e-disposition 12, some custom values added there. So we'll build a location where those national custom elements will be easily obtainable. All right, any other questions related to the use of custom elements? All right, I see that Eric Chaney from the Office of EMS at NHTSA has joined the call. I was listed to talk a little bit about the NEMSIS RFI that's been released, but with Eric on the call, is it okay if I turn it over to you, Eric, to discuss that release and then also the upcoming meeting in January?
Sure, Clay, that's fine. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to give you an update that the National EMS Information System, RFI, has been posted. We've been talking about this for some time now. It cleared DOT clearance last week. I think it was posted the other day. For those of you that are used to looking at the FedBiz Ops, we're no longer using that system now. Apparently that's a government-wide transition. We're using sambeta.gov or sam.gov. So that might be a little bit of a transition if you were looking for it in FedBiz Ops. It's not there. The link's been provided on the announcement for this meeting. I've also asked Rachel to send us out to the data managers and the state directors through the NEMSIS contacts So we're trying to make sure that all of our partners have access to it. The background on the RFI is simply, as our CIO at NHTSA put it, to find out if there's a better way to do what we're doing now. And that's really the intent. When you read the description and background, I think that's pretty clear. There is one section I want to highlight for everyone, and that's the section about hosting. There's a lot of talk about hosting the data and transition to federally approved cloud services or cloud centers. There are particular vendors that have contracts. There are also private entities that have FedRAMP approved facilities. So just one piece of that I wanted to highlight for you. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them on this call, or if you want to contact me directly, I can give you as much information as I can. However, I think the bulk of it is contained in the document. Any questions for me on that particular topic right now? Okay, I'll take the next item, which is the announcement of an integration of pre-hospital and hospital data summit. So for about the last 6 months, the National Security Council has been hosting meetings internally with different vendors, different parties regarding integrating pre-hospital and hospital data. And a lot of this stems from a meeting held at the Department of Homeland Security Office of Health Affairs about 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, relating to active shooter. One of the things that was discussed is the desire to do sort of forensics analysis of data of patients from the time that they were injured and they had their first documentation completed, pre-hospital, through the different hospitals or clinics that they actually went to, and then through their final disposition, hopefully discharged to the hospital, but if not, through Morgan and tracking autopsy data. So there was a lot of discussion about the barriers to doing that, discussions about HIPAA and the legal requirements, bridging records pre-hospital to hospital and sharing records between hospitals. The National Security Council took that on as one of their projects this year. They asked the Office of the National Coordinator, which Rachel Abbey, I know a lot of you know, and NHTSA Office of EMS, Dr. Kramer in our office, to host this for them. The meeting is in January. It's on the 29th. It's in Washington, D.C. at the JW Marriott. It will be by invitation. However, I think we have extended an invitation to every EPCR vendor that I know of. So my ask on this meeting is, if you feel that you have not received an invitation, please contact me and I will be happy to make sure you receive one. The meeting is set up from 8:30 to, I believe, 4. It's 3 roundtable discussions. There's one on hospital data, where we will have a representative from one of the large hospital vendors like a Cerner or an Epic, representatives from the University Academic Medical Center, and then representatives from the hospital associations. They're going to talk for about 8 minutes apiece, and the rest of that hour will be dedicated to questions and answers from the people participating. We have the same setup then for the pre-hospital environment. We have Dr. Kramer sort of setting the stage. We have an EPCR vendor, and we have asked Richard Hale from ESO to be that person to give the high-level overview of data collection from the pre-hospital side of the house. And then we have someone speaking to the integration piece and the desire and need and what we would like to see. And then the rest of that particular hour would be questions and answers from the field. And then the last piece, the third party, are representatives from the HIE environment, from the data and informatics world. And we have identified organizations that, quite frankly, in 30 years of working with EMS, I've never heard of. But this is their life. They look at integrating data. They look at how it could be better used, better served. And most of these are focused specifically on the healthcare environment. So it should be a very interesting meeting. Again, I want to extend the invitation to our vendors and make sure you have the opportunity to attend if you would like to. There is no funding to bring individual groups or vendors into the meeting. So that part's on your own. But please contact me if you have not received the invitation or if you would like more information. And Julian, that's all I have on that topic.
All right, thank you, Eric. We'll go ahead and move to open forum. If anyone has questions, concerns, comments, this is a great opportunity to bring those up for this group. You're welcome to unmute your microphone or to use the chat feature.
Yeah, Julianne, this is Clay. I'll just add one quick comment. Jason raised a great question in the comment section. I'm not sure everyone got to view it, so just wanted to make sure it was stated. When we were talking about adding the custom values to e-payment 05 to support the CMS 2020 physician signature changes, those custom values will only be associated with version 3.4.0. Those values have been added to 3.5. So just wanted to make sure that was clear.
That was a great question from Shane. Thanks for addressing that, Clay. Are there any other issues, comments, concerns, questions? Our next meeting date is December 18th, same time, same place. And then in January, we will resume the regular meeting schedule, and that will be January 8th and the 22nd. Thank you all for being here with us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules and for participating in the V3 implementation call. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julianne.